When soldiers in World War II dug into frozen ground to survive nights that could kill a man in just a few hours, they didn't have, fancy thermal tents, ultralight sleeping bags, or reflective bivvies. Yet many of those foxholes stayed surprisingly warm. Warm enough that frost didn't settle inside, while men in modern nylon shelters today shiver, despite all the so-called advanced gear. The difference, well, it came down to one overlooked heat principle, one that most campers and preppers have, honestly, forgotten. It wasn't about insulation, it was about heat direction. Every modern tent is designed to trap air, not reflect radiant heat. That's fine for summer or, mild autumn, but in freezing conditions, a nylon or polyester tent becomes a cold sink. Heat from your body escapes straight into the frozen ground and never returns. World War II soldiers learned to reverse that, and they did it without a single gadget. In winter campaigns like the Battle of the Bulge and the Eastern Front, soldiers had to endure nights where temperatures plummeted far below freezing. They quickly realized that the air wasn't the main enemy. The ground was. The earth pulled body heat faster than the air could. So, instead of lying on top of it, they dug into it. A standard foxhole was more than just a defensive shelter. It was a microclimate. The walls of packed soil acted as natural insulation, blocking wind and trapping heat. But that wasn't enough. What made it truly warm was the one-step heat hack they discovered almost by accident, creating a heat reflector using their own environment. Soldiers would line the bottom of the foxhole with branches, sticks, or even dry grass. Then they'd light a small fire beside the hole, not inside it, and use a metal sheet, helmet, or even a wet poncho angled toward the foxhole entrance to reflect heat downward. The setup looked crude, but it worked flawlessly. The reflected radiant heat sank into the earthen walls and warmed the interior from the sides instead of just from the air above. The result was a steady, dry heat that outperformed most enclosed tents, even under snow. Today's tents focus on retaining air warmth, but air is a terrible conductor of heat when moisture and wind are involved. The thin fabric shell allows radiant energy to dissipate quickly, and once condensation forms, heat loss doubles. This is why, even with a high-end sleeping bag, campers wake up clammy, cold and miserable. We soldiers avoided that entirely because their setup heated the structure, not the air. When soil warms even slightly, it radiates that warmth back to the body evenly through the night. Think of it as the Earth's version of a slow-release furnace. Their foxholes stayed just above freezing inside, even when the air outside dropped below zero. That small difference meant survival. The modern equivalent would be building a semi-dug cold-weather camp instead of pitching a tent on top of the ground. A shallow trench lined with logs, grass or pine needles, covered partially with a tarp or reflective sheet angled to a side fire, will outperform even a four-season tent if you set it up correctly. If you ever camp in sub-zero conditions, it's wise to skip the temptation to rely solely on your tent. Instead, create a hybrid shelter inspired by the World War II foxhole principle. Start by finding slightly sloped ground, ideally where you can dig without hitting roots or rock. Carve out a space just deep enough to sit in, with one side open toward where you'll build your fire. Line the bottom with a thick layer of branches, dry leaves, or any available vegetation to create a barrier from direct ground contact. Once your fire is lit about 2 feet away, use a metal survival blanket, spare tarp, or aluminum sheet angled from the fire toward your sleeping space. This reflects radiant heat downward and keeps smoke flowing upward. If snow or rain threatens, create a roof from branches and another tarp layer, allowing vent space for airflow. Within minutes, you'll feel warmth not just in the air, but radiating from the walls and floor. This setup uses the same heat transfer method soldiers unknowingly mastered: radiant conduction. Instead of trying to trap air, you heat mass. The earth, branches, and even your gear slowly absorb heat and give it back through the night. It's sustainable, silent, and doesn't rely on battery-powered heaters or heavy equipment. You know, in history, survival wasn't about high-tech fabrics or brand names. It was really about physics, understanding how heat moves. These days, modern campers often pile insulation above themselves, thinking that thicker always means warmer. But, well, WWII soldiers worked smarter. They built shelters that worked with the earth, not against it. Their makeshift reflectors, improvised bedding, and shallow trenches actually created a heat loop between the body, fire, and ground. When the Soviets or Germans dug in during those freezing campaigns, their shelters honestly looked pretty primitive. But reports show they could maintain bearable temperatures even when it was, -20 outside. Soldiers described the walls actually steaming as body heat and reflected warmth mixed together. They might have been cold, sure, but they weren't freezing to death because they were heating the environment, not just enduring it. Try that principle yourself on your next winter camp. Instead of just setting up a tent on cold, flat ground, carve into the earth, line it, and redirect heat back into it. The warmth that lingers until morning will, prove the old soldiers right. We've forgotten more about warmth than most modern designs ever learned. The beauty of WWII's fieldcraft lies in its simplicity. Everything was done with purpose, using what nature provided. Soldiers had no luxury to carry bulky shelters or chemical hand warmers. Yet they endured nights in conditions that would shut down modern gear, because they understood the principles that modern camping has, quite frankly, overlooked. Cold air rises when trapped, and heat dissipates upward. The foxhole system, though, reversed that equation entirely. Heat was drawn downward and held where it was needed, close to the body, close to the earth. So, when someone brags about their 4-season tent and ultralight sleeping system, remember this: 75 years ago, soldiers with nothing but shovels, branches, and fire-built shelters that defied the cold far better. The only upgrade they needed was understanding. If you found this guide useful and want to uncover more forgotten survival methods from the world's toughest winters and wars, don't forget to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this video. The next piece of lost history might just save you on your next cold night outdoors.